Hello everybody, it's Jamie Hancock here. Welcome to another No Rocket Ships episode. Today we're going to be talking about partnerships, career growth and the sort of slightly weird behaviour that blokes in tech get up to. But before we get into it with Katie, I just wanted to thank Patchworks, our client, who have sponsored not just this podcast as we start it, but the newsletter that we write as well. I'm sure you'll find a link to the newsletter somewhere if you don't already get it. And please comment and DM me on LinkedIn or wherever else with any comments you have of today's episode. Let's go. All right. Welcome to Katie Bassett from Voyado, but Katie Bassett, welcome.
Hi.
Who are you? Introduce yourself.
Thank you, Jamie. Hi, my name is Katie, and as you mentioned, I work at Voyado. I'm a partner manager at Voyado. We're a Swedish CXP, so customer experience platform. We specialise in marketing automation and loyalty, and then on-site product recommendation, search, and merchandising as well. A pleasure to be here.
Lovely to see you. And I've asked you to join me because A, you've been so incredibly helpful to me in the past. You are a pay it forward person, I would say. Fair?
Yeah, okay. I've not heard that before, but yeah.
Every time I've ever asked for any help on LinkedIn, you've been the first person to offer an office or something, or you've always been helpful.
Yeah, it's probably the chronic people pleaser in me, which kind of goes quite nicely with partnerships, I would say. But yeah.
Welcome to the therapist office. Okay, so in Rocket Ships fashion, we're going to talk about three things. We're going to talk about partnership, and I suppose I want to talk about how it's changed in the years that I've been involved in watching it from the outside. Secondly, being a young woman in tech, which might be quite fun. And thirdly, that kind of career progression, I suppose, which maybe goes with the second one. So let's talk about partnerships first. I think I sort of asked you to think about what's changed in partnerships since you started getting involved. So you were worked in partnerships at BigCommerce, I think, didn't you?
Yeah.
But at Voyado, you started it from scratch. So let's talk about, you walk in the door at Voyado, there's nothing. Where do you start and why do you do what you do? Because I think that's a fascinating moment, especially for somebody who's, you haven't done it before.
Yeah, I think it's even just in the 4 or 5 years I've been in partnerships, the ecosystem is constantly evolving and changing. And your point of going straight into a Voyado, we're a 20-year-old company, but in the UK, we're relatively new. Partnerships is absolutely integral to the go-to-market, not just from a brand awareness perspective, but to help, collaborate on our product and work with, SIs and agencies as well. But I think what interests me, if you look at the landscape of partnerships, like it has really changed. It's not a new concept. It's been around for a long time. But you look at companies such as Microsoft, Shopify, a really good example, even Deliveroo, they've made that integral to their offering. And I think some companies are behind the curve and some companies are really ahead of the curve when it comes to partnerships. I think Voyado is very forward when it comes to making it an integral part of the company and the go-to-market. But openly it's a new function, so kind of starting from the ground up. There's lots of learnings there. I think my background was in sales before, and I've probably taken quite a lot of that rejection and a lot of that kind of like get up and go from that and brought that into partnerships. We're seeing a big shift, generally speaking. If you look at Microsoft, I think are the first actually that have actually created a role for partnerships as a chief partnerships officer. That's really interesting. I think the ISV perspective or the ISV side of partnerships is where we're probably seeing a lot of the involvement, and we're seeing a lot of companies make that integral when it comes to, well, I'm not a specialist in M&A, but when it comes to, do we buy this, do we build it, or do we partner? And I think that's really, really interesting. Personally, on a Voyado front, it's been, a really eye-opening experience building everything from the ground up, because you have to really select the right focus partners that really resonate with your kind of brand story and then really bring that to life when it comes to implementation, etc.
And I think I had lunch with somebody a couple of days ago who was talking about their partnership team, and he said, they're just trying to do too much. They're spreading themselves far too thin. They need to just do three things well. So when you walk, I suppose that sort of idea of focus must really have been what you tried to do when you started. You must have been aware that you only had a working, that you only had a number of hours. So how did you decide what to do, and what did you do when you first started?
I think I definitely fell into that trap of doing too much, and that's been a really key learning for me in terms of you kind of want to spread yourself thin, because when you first go into a business like Voyado, let's say, and there is no function in the UK, you know, you've got no partners, it's really hard to justify your value as a partner manager, and you don't have the data, the retrospective data, to showcase how you're performing. You've only got these kind of aspirational metrics. So I think identifying, I guess there's a case of, yeah, maybe spreading yourself thinly at first, kind of getting the ball rolling, but then actually building in a process around how can we identify the right partners. And I think one key thing that's been quite valuable around the data as well is actually taking the lid off, if you're working with an SI or an agency, like how do they operate as a business, and what are their metrics, how are they measuring the business, and if you can begin to look at their data and combine that with your target accounts, how you want to align on ICP and go to market, that allows you to kind of flesh out maybe the partners that maybe don't align with your go-to-market strategy. So I think there's been a big learning curve there in terms of identifying the right partners. And yeah, of course, you can fall into the trap of spreading yourself too thin. But I think once you begin to get the wheels in motion, and I guess one of the beautiful things about partnerships, it's really cross-department. You know, you've got sales, customer success, marketing, all of those functions that really need to be in harmony. If you can crack that, which I feel like we have done at Voyado, I think you see great success off the back of it.
And you talk about data being, you know, once you've got success data, what does it look like? So what are when you now look at data that you, well, I'm sure you're quite proud because you've made it work. You've got data you like and you're proud of. What data do you really value, and what do you do with it?
Yeah, really good question. For us personally, it's influence. So we would measure partners on, business brought to Voyado or collaboratively go to market. So if you're looking at net new opportunities that have come in through partners, we can then measure on influence. So we see around 30% of all of the UK revenue is coming through partnerships. That's a really good metric for us to measure. But then there's also like a cultural fit as well that I think often is hard to measure, because often you want to work with certain partners, right, that don't necessarily care about you. But I guess it's understanding how you can really get to understand their go-to-market as well. So that cultural fit, I think, is also not often mentioned, but really important when it comes to building out the foundations of a partnership.
And I can say this, you might not be able to, but I've always thought it was fairly clear which agencies can win and which agencies can't win. Do you have to end up being quite ruthless? Do you think about who you want to work with based on them being able to win?
To a degree, yes. I think what's quite unique about Voyado is we're fishing in quite a big pond. I mean, our ICP is retail and fashion. And kind of growing in or growth hacking into a new market has actually been a case of where are our customers? So who are our target accounts? Who are the existing customers we're currently working with, and what did their ecosystem look like? So that's where ISV technology becomes quite important as well. But you do have to, going back to that kind of revenue model, identify if there is going to be a potential revenue through working together as a partner. So that data, that model piece is really important, because you could be spending months and months with an agency that just isn't either working across the same ICP or isn't necessarily performing, which, you know, I think if you look at the ecosystem, it is bloated, it is very saturated. There are agencies struggling, and equally our ISV technology partners that are also struggling. So I think you have to really fish in the right pond, and that kind of analysis around ICP, target, kind of go to market becomes really important to make sure that you are putting the resources in the right place.
And I suppose, again, I'll say this, but you won't. Partnerships, when we first started Commons Futures, however many years ago, 12 years ago, partnership people were mostly failed male salespeople who played golf and drank beer.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't really, they weren't product focused. They were people, I don't know, whatever, there was a group there. It's obviously massively changed and changed much, much more for the better. Right? I've seen it in working with all of the ecosystem partners I work with. What do you think now are the strengths that you have to be really effective as a partner person in this ecosystem, this kind of commerce ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because you raise a point where I think there's probably a bit of a perception still in the ecosystem that this partnership gig is a lot of fun, and there is a lot of, and as a woman I think I probably really, what you say there resonates with me in terms of being able to build a brand and a voice in this space when typically it is buddy, let's go and kind of build a relationship off the premise of who we like. But I would say, for me, I found it very valuable having that sales experience. I think I am a hunter, not a gatherer as such. I'm very much somebody that can execute quickly and hunt for those relationships. And sometimes that comes down to having within your partner program, a differentiation between recruitment and a differentiation between partner management as well. And I would say, I like to think I'm across both, but really, I'd say that sales background, especially for this role at Voyado, has been really integral to me kind of igniting relationships. So I would say that I think a lot of the work within partnerships goes unnoticed, and it's one of the challenges within partnerships because there's a lot of work beneath the scenes that you're not just a new business development, but you're also a project manager. You're essentially the glue that ties third parties and businesses together. And I think it's a shame when it gets a rep of a lot of alcohol or a lot of networking roundtables where you're not necessarily like working in some people's perspective. And I think that really should be 10% of the role, and outside of that it's it's a really multifaceted job. So especially as a woman, but just generally speaking in partnerships, I think you have to really showcase the value of partnerships in some cases and really identify the processes and the systems to make sure that you can reflect the value that you're bringing.
So I want to talk about your, I don't know how you want to describe it, the fitness partnership group that you've built, because I remember talking to various people over a period of time saying, I think that's a piece of magic, actually, a proper piece of activation that's not about beer, I thought it was a fantastic idea. So we'll talk about that, but I don't want to, maybe you could talk about it in some of the next answers, but let's talk about being a young woman in tech. I've been a very passionate male mentor of young women in tech for ages and ages, because you could always just see women getting patted on the head in almost every single business I would have seen. But I wonder, you seem to have sort of become slightly more empowered over the last few years, and I just wonder what your experience has been like and is like being a young woman in a very, very ruthless, punchy, aggressive, not always truthful. It's a tough world. The ecosystem that we work in is a really tough world, right?
Yeah, it is. I'd say Voyado has absolutely given me the grounds to kind of explore that empowerment piece where I necessarily haven't had that possibility in previous roles. But I think just on the topic, there's quite a lot of themes that I could probably get into. I don't know how long we have.
Go, that's fine. Be as truthful as you feel you want to be, Katie. I'll give you
I think
permission.
it's an interesting topic. I think the one thing I like to preface it with is that it's very polarizing, this conversation, and I think for us to move forward, I actually think we should be focusing on allyship and fight. And I can count on my hand about 5, if not more, real advocates for women, male advocates for women in our ecosystem. I think the conversation is really moving forward, but I would definitely say that, as it's a double-edged sword. In some ways, we're seeing more often than not more women coming into leadership. We're seeing a big discrepancy there in terms of women going to university and getting an education. But on the other side of the coin, we've got only 20% of C-level are female. So I think women are naturally battling with decades of a system that has been built for men. So that's an interesting topic for me because we're not very much designed in the same way. So we have a very different hormonal cycle, for example. Which I feel like we are making the right steps forward, but equally it's a topic that's really hard for a lot of women to broach. And I would imagine being at the top is probably quite a lonely place for certain women. If we touch upon a few topics such as like hormonal challenges with diseases like endometriosis, PCOS, PMDD, I could say that actually my company has really helped me in that sense because I've had private healthcare that's helped me personally when I've struggled with PCOS and PMDD. On a personal front, being able to explore that with a gynecologist, and I wouldn't have been able to afford to do that if it wasn't for my company. So in tech specifically, I think there are avenues that are really supportive, but I think the conversation is where it becomes quite polarizing because I think men feel somewhat isolated from the conversation, and also so do women. So it's opportunities even like this to discuss it and bring it to the forefront, I think are kind of how I like to focus.
It's interesting. I've always sort of lived and breathed sort of just slightly outside the ecosystem, right? And it's been a fascinating place to be, just outside looking in, because you feel like you know what's going on, but you don't really know what's going on. But, as clients, I've always found frustrating, I suppose, is that sales directors, CROs are generally men, marketing directors are generally women, partnerships who are really important and becoming more important are kind of maybe a bit more female populated nowadays than they used to be. In fact, I would say that most of the strong partnership managers now that I meet are women rather than men, because they've changed the way that the role looks, right? They've become product experts, etc., etc. But equally, when you really get down to it in tech, sales wins. And so the bloke who's running sales typically tells the woman who's running marketing what he wants. And that's that's as you described, that sort of that's the decades old system that isn't going away.
Yeah.
It hasn't quite, that still feels like there's probably 20 examples you could make of that.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think even like premenopausal, menopausal women, that those who are in C-level probably are quite a few, and so there isn't really that conversation for that cohort of women. So I think just by nature we're evolving, and women entering the workforce and entering leadership, and I'm excited to see how the conversation progresses. I do. It's no surprise that I think a lot of women are going into partnerships, because I think by nature we are we build relationships, and I think we can see a lot of that. But I think what we're looking for is actually a route forward for them to get into leadership, which is something I'm really, really passionate about.
It's interesting. The other good thing, I think, is that women don't generally put themselves in the story, whereas men always do. He said, having just put himself in the story.
Not at all, but I think women, they lead themselves in a way that, we'll be saying our team, my, that conversation is often around our and we rather than my. There isn't this innate feeling of I'm going to get to the top and I never want to slander men because I'm not going to generalize, but I think women just aren't as forthcoming when it comes to having the conversation and being vocal. And Emily Liu actually is a really good representation of this. She's a public speaking coach who I absolutely adore. I work with her at Big Commerce, but that leading into those conversations of how you can have a voice and how you can, establish yourself. I think there's a lot of support out there to do that now, but I think it's just not first nature for many women. So I think there's a lot that we could focus on in terms of empowering women and encouraging them to take that leadership stance.
And how about the dinosaurs? Are there still dinosaurs?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, definitely. And on both sides as well. I think it's, we're evolving, as I say. And I think that piece around, you never want to ostracize people. And it can be quite polarizing, certain conversations around gender, sexuality and leadership. So I think that point around leading with allyship and leaning into people around you, men in the ecosystem who may not understand a woman's experience, but really try and advocate for that. Even having me on this podcast, I guess, is a form of that in itself, I think, is where I really like to focus, as opposed to kind of continuing to polarize the conversation and make men or women feel ostracized on either side. So yeah, there will always be a thought track that needs to be challenged, but I think it's in a way of like proving the good and the value in like women entering the workforce and just making light of maybe the challenges that they have if they are entering into a male-dominated space.
Right. Okay. So career, having we haven't pointed any fingers. I thought you might point fingers, but you've been very good. Well done. So talk to me about the fitness thing. I don't want to lose sight of that, right? So I'm not going to call it a fitness thing, but tell me what you've done, because it's still going, right? You're still doing it and you're doing well with it. So
yeah, it's an exciting venture for us. And again, Voyado have kind of really allowed us to have autonomy to take this, because I think it kicked off maybe 2 years ago. And really at that time, I don't think anybody was really, especially in the partnerships world, bringing something like this to the table. And I think probably where the idea or inspiration came from is working as a woman in tech partnerships when I was at a previous company, where you are really exposed to alcohol and you're really exposed to the kind of default being, let's get somebody behind the bar and let's get the right people in the room. And I think that just didn't land with me. And I also think if you've ever worked out with a client or somebody that you're not too familiar with, you're trying to build a relationship with, you absolutely bond in a certain kind of way once you've done some kind of, team-based exercise. So that was kind of like a light bulb moment. And initially, we explored it with partnerships, because getting our name in the ecosystem actually was quite, it's a very saturated space. We want to have a low touch way of getting people together. And it really resonated. And again, going back to that point around justifying, like when I don't have the data, I haven't got 30% of revenue coming through partnerships at this stage, I needed to then showcase how we were going to market. And ultimately, off the back of that, we actually did get business because we had partners who I'd never really got in the room with before, managing to get a connection, and I could show them our business proposition and form that partnership. So then ultimately we've closed business together since then. So I can now, 6 months into that, go back and say this opportunity came off the back of that. So it's not a direct ROI discussion, which you can often have challenges with, but actually it's a way of bringing us to market. So I think that was also a challenge in itself. But
and for people that don't know what it is, just what was the original format? Because I know it's changed. I want to talk about the trade show version of it. So just talk about the original, and then let's talk about the trade show.
Yeah, of course. It started small, so it was. We're very lucky that we have a partnership with a gym called Manor in London, so that gave us a facility to do several types of classes. So we've done a run club, we've done a HIIT class, and then we've done a sound bath as well, which was quite popular. And then that evolved into what we call Retail Wars. So this is an event that's coming up in October. This is exclusively for brands, and the whole premise is that, again, you're networking, you're getting people in the room, but you're adding like a healthy level of competition. You might have seen a lot around High Rocks and Turf Wars. I think right now it's kind of like the new run club as well. So I think we kind of like piggybacked off that hype, knowing that for us it makes sense in retail, like being our number one ICP, like where are all of the sports brands, like this is something that they can really engage in. And yeah, it's really exciting. There's some really exciting updates that we can't talk about just yet that are coming. And looking at the sign-up list, it's really exciting. And I think, it's the first time we've done it, and there's been a lot of trust in the business to say, let's do something that's a little bit out of the box. But on the day, we've got every bit of ingredients that we could want in an event. We've got our ICP there, we've got networking opportunities, we're going to have a panel discussion following the competition, we've got an award ceremony, and then we have an after party as well. So there will be probably some alcohol in that, so I can't say it's exclusively not drinking, but I think you've got a healthy level there.
It is. I can't tell you how refreshing it is to see partnership activity that's not the same shit everybody's done for 20 years. So well done. And it's become something that he runs at. I've seen it run at a couple of trade shows as well, right? And again, it sort of looks like it's become one of the best things about the trade show.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, somebody has probably also had this idea, but I think it's kickstarted a lot of fringe events that are now focused on exercise. And we do that ourselves when we have our Love Generation event in September. Like, we will often do a fitness class as well. And I think it's a very low touch way of getting people together without pressure as well. So I think when you think, especially I live in London, and like often I'll be going on ClassPass to different classes, like having that opportunity to get a free workout in and then also actually do work and network, I think is also quite attractive. So it's been successful on that front.
While I think about it, I need to introduce you. Do you know Frankie Thorogood?
I don't know.
He runs I'll send you, so he runs an Instagram account called High Rocks Wanker. But he basically now flies around the world doing high rocks. He used to own TCA, and he owns Potted, the crafting business.
Yeah.
Great bloke. He's in our retail community. He would be great to come along to Retail Wars.
Oh, so the power of networking.
Yeah. His Instagram, he's very self-deprecatory, but also horrendously fit. So, yeah, if you manage to get him to come, be prepared to lose, I suspect.
I'm quite scared. Yeah, I've re-signed up with my PT, so I'm hoping I can get some good fitness in before then.
Okay, so career progression. So what does good look like, I suppose, is the question, because you must have had that thought. I hope you have.
Yeah. It's a really interesting one, I think, especially now I've just turned 30, because what it looked like 10 years ago was very different. And I guess for context, so I grew up in Cornwall. I know many people go on holiday to Cornwall, and it's this gorgeous, beautiful place, but growing up there is a very different kind of upbringing. I mean, I'm very privileged to have grown up there, but equally in terms of job opportunities and actually understanding what I want to do with my career, that was often a big question mark. And I'm an equestrian at heart. I mean, I haven't had horses for many years because I'm living in London and trying to find that balance. But if you asked me when I was 16 what do I want to do, it would be a question. I want to be a horse rider for the rest of my life. And school as well, it's key to mention, not many people know this, but I'm dyslexic. I was absolutely terrible at school. Like, I really didn't understand it. I really couldn't get my head around exams and like learning. That learning piece for me was really quite frightening because I was bad at it. So I was kind of probably a bit fearful of kind of coming to terms with dyslexia at that point. So for a long time, I didn't actually think I was going to go to university.
And was your dyslexia diagnosed late, early, when?
I was about 14 or 15. It was actually my brother who was diagnosed before me. And for English, for example, I can't spell very well. Like, if you could see what I try and spell sometimes, you would probably just laugh your head off. But
No, my middle son Frank is dyspraxic, and he was diagnosed at 13. And
yeah,
it's been fascinating to see him deal with it, and well, not deal with it for a while, and use it as an excuse not to do very well, but then absolutely deal with it.
yeah.
It's been really interesting to watch him.
It is, yeah. I think especially back then, I don't know how well known dyslexia or dyspraxia was, and I sometimes think I am dyspraxic. I haven't really explored that side of it, but when I think about the way my brain works, formulas, memory, don't ask me about hand-eye coordination because I just don't have it. But when it comes to that, I was very much against going to university and kind of just focusing on the things I'm good at, which at the time was horse riding. And then I went to uni quite late, about 2 years later than everybody else. I actually saw a degree for retail management at MMU. I don't even think it exists anymore. It's a marketing degree, which they do have, but I think they've cancelled this arm of it. But it really resonated with me, and I didn't look anywhere else. I just went and did that. And that was a catalyst for me because that was the first time ever that, wow, I'm not stupid. I'm actually really enjoying learning. And then in terms of career, it was really a case of, how can I become independent as quickly as possible? How can I make as much money as quickly as possible? And that for me was sales. So even before graduating, I actually had to take a day off, half day off to graduate because I already had my job in sales, selling media intelligence. And really the first 5 years were job hopping, getting that title, increasing my salary. That was the kind of like number one priority for me. And then I fell into partnerships, like quite accidentally, actually. And then that's really, now as I'm coming into my 30s, where I really look back and think, I'm not looking for, getting to the next step so aggressively. It's actually more of a case of like, how can I future-proof my career? And with that, it's things like, looking at the market where AI is taking us, especially from a tech perspective. I think it'd be silly not to look at that in terms of like which role is really going to support the future of our ecosystem in e-commerce. So yeah, it's more so around sitting still and developing my skill set so that I can really kind of jump into the future when it comes to partnerships. So yeah, career is an interesting one. There's also an angle of women and negotiating and having to navigate that as well, which I think is a really key topic.
Yes, I bet. Yes, I feel like we're in a moment where like 10 people in Silicon Valley actually know what's going on.
Yeah.
Again. So that was what was happening at the very beginning. And I feel like we've gone back there for a little while. For the next year, I reckon we're all going to be sitting in the dark going, let's get a product feed quick into an LLM. Let's do all those things that everybody's terrified and running around doing now. But actually, I think I put something yesterday. I spoke to a retailer yesterday who still runs £4.5 billion retail business off Excel spreadsheets with a 1974 mainframe and makes 100 million a year, does great. So the market isn't going to, because we're in it, it's easy to feel like it's all going to, but it might not all change overnight.
It's complexity, isn't it? Like, it seems almost, when you say it out loud, quite straightforward when you think of the gadgets that we use and the ease of technology, but actually from a company lens, it's extremely difficult because you're not just dealing with technology, you're dealing with people and execution. So yeah, an interesting space. But I mean, from a partnership perspective, you're seeing like that role become really integral. So I think it's actually one of the most, might just be because it's the field that I'm in, but one of the most like sought after roles currently. I'm seeing, companies that I wouldn't necessarily expect to even have partner managers include that role and bring it into their go-to-market. So yeah, I think it's a good time to be in partnerships, absolutely.
Yes, I agree. And I think, everybody will need more and more of them. I was talking to your old employer yesterday, big commerce, whatever we call them nowadays. And as they reform the business effectively, they're they're going to need an entirely different ecosystem because they're trying to lean into that whole LLM space. And, does everybody have those relationships? Well, no, but they're going to be, they're absolutely required, because without them, unless you know that person's phone number, you can't get it done.
Yeah. And I think you also, on the other end of the scale, you see decisions being made without the right informed data to prove that this is the right decision. So you're seeing a lot around consolidation, you're seeing a lot around that argument around, do we buy this, do we build this, do we partner? Partnerships is really integral to that, because if you mess it up, if you screw up the partner relationships that you've built your business on, then they're all, it's again future proofing it that way. So I think having a lens on where the direction of the market's going, whilst that can be quite challenging to do, is quite a key hack, I would say.
Katie, thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you soon. I won't make Retail Wars, unfortunately. Whilst you would have loved to see my deep squat, I'm afraid you'll have to save for another time. But yeah, I'm sure I'll see you for coffee in the autumn. And thank you again.
Thank you so much.